Hello guys, in this video I am going to add a new weapon model and I'm gonna add the option to switch between different weapons in our inventory. Also we're gonna do some improvements and prepare our game for networking. So before we continue, I noticed that my weapon is not exactly looking at the center of the screen. So if this is happening for you as well, you need to adjust the rotation of the weapon because we are making the weapon looking at the center of the screen by making the right hand looking at the center of the screen. So if I remove this from maximize and bring this here and let's take a look from above to our character. So we don't have any problem horizontally, we have a problem vertically. So if I select my weapon from weapon holder, so this is my weapon, and let's increase the rotation a little bit, something like that, and now it is going to look better. So I think something like 90 degrees is good for my weapon rotation. Let's go to the prefabs and select my weapon, put the X on 90. So you just need to play around with numbers and save the values that you feel is more natural. Now it looks a little bit better, but when I change the right hand data, now the left hand has also misplaced, so we need to fix that too. Now if I do this again and go to my layer and let's see, where is it? This is the left hand target. All I need to move it only a little bit and it should be fine. So yep, that's it. Let's just select our weapon prefab and put the values for the left hand. So we did not change the rotation, so I'm just gonna change the position. That's the value for X. Let's take the value for other axis as well, for the Y, and finally for the Z. So that's it. So as I said, play around with the numbers and choose a number that you're comfortable with and look better. So this is good enough for this one. Now let me go to the weapon script. Here it is. So we need to create a variable for the amount of ammo inside this weapon. And in the shoot function, we can also check if we have ammo. If we have that, we're going to take the shot, and we're also going to take 1 from the ammo amount. So to recognize what type of ammo this weapon use, we can go ahead and create a string right here and name it ammo ID. Also, let's create a public getter for the ammo ID. And now let's go to the character script. And here we already create a weapon. Let's create an ammo as well. So when we equip our weapon, here we can simply say, once you've equipped the weapon, let's go and set the ammo to null and then do a for loop on the items. And if the item I is not null, and if the item I type is ammo, and if our weapon.ammoid equals to item I.id, in that case, choose this item as ammo. So we need to bring a lot of the game logic into the character script from the third-person controller script. So to start, let's bring reloading first. We need to bring all of them, but let's do the reloading first for an example. So here I am going to cut that from third-person controller and paste it inside the character. And also let's create a getter for reloading. Now simply in the third-person controller, to fix these errors, we can simply just say character.reloading. So instead of the reloading, we can replace all of them. And if we go further down, here is a bunch of other values we need to replace. So that's it. So we haven't created a setter for it. I'm just gonna cut reload finished to the character script. So let's put it here. And I'm just gonna change this to reloading equals to false. And let's also create a public function called reload. So if we go to the character controller, here is when we initiate the reload. So let's cut these two lines and bring this inside character in the reload. So we're already setting the reload to true, and we need a reference to the animator. So let's go and create a reference to the animator. I'm gonna do it here, private animator, and we can get that in the awake function. Here it is. Now the error should be gone. And instead of doing all of that inside third-person controller, we're just gonna say character.reload. So that's it. Now let's go to the weapon, and here we have a clip size. I'm gonna create a public getter for the clip size so we could access it from other scripts. And now inside the character, when we call reload, first we're gonna check to see if our weapon is not null, and if we're not reloading, and if our weapon ammo is less than weapon clip size, and also if the ammo is not null and ammo.amount is greater than 0. In that case, we're gonna do the reloading. Let me also copy the conditions and bring them for the reload finished. So now I'm gonna cut them inside reload. So that's how we start our reload. For our reload finished, let me remove the condition if it is not reloading. We don't need that, but we need the rest of the condition. Now we're going to calculate the amount of ammo we need. It is going to be clip size minus the weapon.ammo. And if we don't have that much ammo, then we're just going to set the amount to the amount of ammo that we have. Then we're going to reduce the amount from our ammo and add it to our weapon. So let's also go to the projectile here in the initialize. We are setting the velocity, so let's actually do dot normalized. So now let's go and try to switch our weapon. To do that, first we need a new weapon. I'm going to import this weapon from the asset store. You could use any other weapon that you want. It doesn't have to be this one. All of them can be used. So let's go and import that. First, let me fix this error here in the reload the state machine behavior. So we no longer have the reload in our third-person controller. We have it inside our character. So that is going to be character, and that's it. Now save this and let's go and import our weapon. Here we go. I am not going to import the demo scene, just the prefabs and the resources. So let's import. So that's my weapon package. I'm gonna drag it into my packages folder. Now let's open that. Here it is, and let's bring the prefab. Here it is. Now let's take a look. Because I'm using universal render pipeline, it doesn't have the textures. So let's fix that first. These gizmos are just too big. Let me reduce that. Now if I take a look at the weapon body, let's first actually disable these colliders. So let's disable that. And now if I select this, here it is. This is the material, that is the main texture. So now if I change this to universal render pipeline, I can just go ahead and assign the texture here, and let's also assign the normal. That's it. So that's some of it. Now let's select the other part. Now that's the texture. I'm gonna change it to universal render pipeline, and that is the main texture for this one. Another material we have here, that is the texture and universal render pipeline. Here it is. Okay, now it's better. This is the weapon attachment, I guess. Let me disable this. Yep, this is better. That was too complicated. Now let's also go to the weapon folder again. I think we should be able to find the magazine. Yep, here it is. and drag it under this. Now I am going to move it forward to there. Yep, it is looking good. Now let's also do the texture. Here it is, universal render pipeline, and that is the texture. Okay, this is good. Now let's go and actually bring the other weapon prefab. Here it is. That is my other weapon. So I'm just gonna use this weapon. First, let's drag this under this and let me reset everything. So I don't want to bother myself with all that rotation and position, so I'm just gonna move this to this location, so it's gonna work for this weapon as well. So there's a bunch of colliders on this weapon. That's weird. Let me disable them. Now if I unpack this weapon prefab that we just brought and delete the old weapon and just leave this one. So that's the muzzle. Here it is. That is the flash. Bring it there. And let's also rename this to something else. I'm also gonna change the ID to that. And let's also change the fire rate. Now we have a new weapon. Let me drag it here. So if I delete that and let's save the scene, and if I go to my character script, here at the beginning we are adding this weapon. So let's actually add this one instead, and let's make sure we're gonna add it to our prefab manager. So in the managers we have the prefab manager, and let's add the new weapon and let's apply every change we did. Here it is. Now if I play this, we should have the new weapon. Yep, this is the new weapon. It's looking good. It's not firing because we don't have any bullets. And now even when I hit R, it's not gonna reload because we don't have any ammo to reload. So let's go and fix that. So let's create an ammo for our weapons. I'm just gonna use a cube, but you could use a ammo box or something like that, because later on we're gonna drop the ammo on the ground, and this box or any game object you choose is gonna represent that ammo on the ground. For now, let's imagine this is a little ammo box. So this should be good enough, and let's rename this actually to ammo, and I'm just gonna choose a caliber for it. Let's just say that's our ammo, and here in the script I'm gonna attach an ammo script to this, and I'm gonna choose an ID for this ammo. Let's say this is the ID of our ammo, and if I go to my weapons, I'm gonna choose my weapons, and for the ammo ID I'm gonna choose that ID. So these weapons use that type of ammo. So that's our ammo ID. Let me make a prefab out of this. Let's create a folder and name it ammo. Now open this and bring that here and delete that. Let's also add it to our prefab manager. So that's it. If I save this and go back to the character, here we can also add the ammo to the list of the items you want to initialize. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna pass my ammo ID. Let's say we want 1000 ammo. So if I save this, now we should have the ammo. Let's play. Right now we can reload, and we have the ammo. Now we can fire the bullet. Yep, it looks good. Let's stop this. Now let's go ahead and set up the option to switch our weapons. So first we need the input. To do that, I'm gonna go to my input system, and let's duplicate the look because we're gonna use a value. So I'm gonna duplicate that, and I'm gonna name it switch weapon. So the type is going to be access, and for the input I am going to choose mouse, and let's go with the scroll Y. So we're gonna change the weapon with mouse scroll. And let's save this now and go to the starter asset inputs. And here I am going to add a new float and name it switch weapon. So let's also go and create the functions for this one. Now let's take a look on move is good for this. We're gonna do this by saying on switch weapon. By the way, this part of the method switch weapon should be the exact name you chose for your input here. So switch weapon, you're just gonna add a on to the first and you rename it this way in order to work. So we're gonna get a float value and this is going to be switch weapon input. So let's go ahead and create a switch weapon input. I'm just gonna copy that. This is gonna be switch weapon and this is gonna be switch weapon input, and this is going to be new switch weapon, and let's change that to float. Now we have created an input for that. We also need the animation to switch our weapons. In order to do that, I've found two animations that I can use. The first one is this grab rifle from back, and the other one is put back the rifle. So I'm going to use this for holster and I'm going to use the other one for equip. So you could choose any animation you want. So I've already downloaded these animations, and let's go ahead and inside the clips folder that I have, here it is, grab rifle from back. So that's it. And also put rifle on the back. We need to create two events for our animations. So for the grab rifle from the back, if we select this and let's go to the events here, we're gonna add an event. So when you grab the rifle, at a certain point, you're gonna instantiate the rifle inside the character hand. Let's actually go forward. Here it is. The hand is gonna reach back, and at this point, I wanna instantiate the weapon in the character hand. So at, let's say, this point. In order to do that, I'm gonna create an event here in the events by clicking this button here, and I'm gonna name it on equip. Let's hit enter and apply. So now this animation has an event. Now let's do the same thing for the put the weapon back. So if I play this animation is actually gonna put the weapon back. So I want to remove the weapon from the player's hand at this point. So I'm gonna add the event and name it on holster, and let's hit enter and apply the changes. So now I have two animations with different events. And now to use these animations, I'm actually gonna go to my animator in the layers, in the second layer, which is the layer we have our aiming and our reloading. I'm going to actually, let's create blend tree instead of just a state. So for the blend tree, I'm gonna name this equip. So that's our equip. And let's create another blend tree for holster. In the equip, it is going to be based on the armed. So as I mentioned, we can use this for different types of weapons, for rifle, pistol, and stuff like that. So we could use that. And I'm gonna add the motion field for the equip animation. Grab rifle from back is gonna be our equip. So that's it. And if I go to the holster, I'm gonna also choose armed and add the motion for put rifle back. So that's it. Now I'm going to create an empty state, and I'm not gonna choose any motion for it. Just let's name it empty. And these animations are gonna make transition to the empty. So an empty is gonna make transition to aiming idle. Now let's bring them here. So in order to make transition to these, we need parameters. So let's go and add a trigger and name it equip, and another trigger, name it holster. So from any state, we're gonna make transition to equip if we have equip triggered, and we're gonna do the same thing for the holster if holster is triggered, and by the way, it does not have an exit time. So that's it. We also need two state behaviors, just like the one we did for the reload. So let's go to our script, and here I'm just gonna create a folder, and let's just name it Animator, and I'm gonna drag the reload state machine to the Animator, and let's go and create two more state machines. The first one is gonna be equip state machine, and another one is gonna be holster state machine. So if we open the equip, let's remove all of that and derive from the state machine behavior the same thing for our holster. So we're gonna inherit from state machine behavior, and let's actually open the reload and just use the code we have here for the holster and for the equip. The only difference is we're gonna call different functions, and if I go to my character, instead of calling the reload finished, we are going to call holster finished, and let's also create equip finished. So in the holster state machine, holster finished, and in the equip finished. And we can go ahead and attach the behaviors to the holster, that is the holster state machine, and equip, that is going to be equip state machine. And now we could go to our character script. Let's close some of these, we don't need them here. So in the character script, let's go and create a new boolean called switching weapon. It also has a public getter. So this is true when we are switching our weapon, and let's go to the holster finished and equip finished, and in both of them we're gonna set the switching weapon to false. And now let's change the equip and holster functions. First, I am going to create a weapon, private weapon, and name it weapon to equip. So now let's go to the holster function and equip function. Let me collapse some of those. So this is equip and this is holster. For a start, I'm gonna take a copy of both of them. So that's holster, and take another copy from equip. So that's equip. So we have two of each. Let's take a look at the first equip function. I'm going to check to see if switching weapon is true, and then we're gonna return. Also, if this weapon that is being passed is null, in that case we are going to return. So if everything checks out, let's clear that. We are going to set weapon to equip to this weapon, and if currently we have any weapon, so if our current weapon is not null, we need to holster it. Otherwise, if we don't have a weapon, then we're gonna set the switching weapon to true, and we're gonna set trigger equip in our animator. That is the public equip weapon. Now let's create the private equip weapon, and we don't need to pass that, and I'm gonna add an underline to this. So let's bring all of this, I'm gonna cut that and bring it here. So underline weapon, let me cut that as well and bring it here. So our weapon is going to be weapon to equip. So let's actually check to see if the weapon to equip is not null. In that case, we are going to do all of that. So in the private equip weapon, we check that. We're gonna assign that to the weapon, and then we're just gonna use that as the weapon. So I'm gonna replace all of that with underline weapon. So here it is, and here it is. Also, let's set the weapon to equip to null just after we assigned it to our weapon. Now, if you remember, inside our animator, we created two events. One of them was on equip and the other one was on holster. So these events are going to be called by our animator. Inside on equip, I'm just going to call the private equip weapon. So that's pretty much everything for our equip weapon. Let's go to the holster weapon now. Here we're also going to check if we're switching, then we're going to return. And now if our weapon is not equals to null, then we are going to set the switching weapon to true and trigger holster. And now let's create a private holster weapon. Let's say private, I'm gonna add that. And here I am going to check if our weapon is not null. Then I'm gonna set the game object to false, set that to null, and set the ammo to null. And here on holster, we're gonna call the private holster weapon. And if we have weapon to equip after we holster, we're gonna call on equip. Now let's go to the initialize function. Here it is, initialize, and if I expand this, you see that at the end we're gonna equip the first weapon index, so we no longer use this. Instead, let's clear that part and this part, and weapon to equip equals to that, and then we're gonna call on equip. So let's also create a new function. I'm gonna do it right here, and I'm gonna name it change weapon. It takes a float as direction. So here in the third person controller in the update function, let's get down at the end. If input dot switch weapon is not equals to 0, then call the character dot change weapon and pass the input switch weapon. So if we rotate the mouse scroll, we're gonna call the character change weapon, and we're gonna pass the amount of the scroll to our change weapon function. So here in the character, in the change weapon, I'm going to define an integer, call it x. If direction greater than 0, we're gonna choose 1 as the value of the x. Otherwise, if direction is less than 0, choose -1 as the value of x. Other than that, we're just gonna put 0. So if x is not equals to 0, and if we are not already switching weapon, I'm going to create 3 integers representing the current weapon index, the weapon before the current weapon, and the index of the weapon after the current weapon. So let's loop through the items in our inventory, and if our item is not null and the type of this item is weapon, then we're gonna check to see if it is the current weapon that we're having by comparing the game object, and if it is, we're gonna set the current to I. Otherwise, if we have the current weapon less than 0, which means we haven't found the current weapon yet, and we haven't found the before weapon yet, then we're gonna set this as the before. And at the same time here, we're gonna add another if the current is greater or equal than 0 and the after has not been found yet, we're gonna set that as the after. Now, right after the for loop, here, I'm going to create another integer, call it target. So if x greater than 0, and because we checked that x is not 0, then either it is greater than 0 or less than 0. And inside this, we're going to assign a value for the target weapon. And here at the end, we're going to check if the target is greater or equal than 0. Then we're going to equip that index inside our items. We're going to cast it as a weapon. So if x greater than 0, which means we're going to go forward, in order to do that, we're going to check to see if after is greater than 0. If it is, we're going to choose that as a target. Otherwise, if before is greater than 0, we're going to choose that as the target. And the same thing here in the else, we're gonna check if b4 is greater or equal than 0. We're gonna choose b4 as the target. Otherwise, we're gonna check after, and if it is greater or equal than 0, we're gonna choose that as the target. It is a little bit weird. I have hard-coded a few things, but it works. That's the important thing. Now all remains is to go to the third person controller, and here when we set the aim layer weight in the update function, we also need to add another condition to this. Let's put all of this inside parentheses and say if the character dot switching weapon or all of that. So in this case, we're gonna choose the one as the aim layer weight. And for the left hand weight, we need to add another condition. Let's do it after armed. I'm gonna say, and our character switching weapon is false, and reloading is false, and the rest of the condition. So when we are switching weapon, we don't want the left hand to be placed on the weapon grip. Now, in order to change our weapon, we need to have multiple weapons first. So here in the character, in the initialize, let's actually add another weapon right here. So now we have 2 weapons in our inventory. Both of them are going to use the same bullet, and we have add bullet for both of them. So let's save this, and if we go to the Unity editor and play now, we have this weapon, and we can reload to get some bullet in the weapon, and here it is. And now if I scroll the mouse button, you see that it's gonna switch to the next weapon, and this is also, we can reload and get some bullet in it. So that's our weapon system. We can simply switch between our weapon. Now I don't like the speed a lot. Let's go to the animator. So here it is. Change the speed to 2 for holster and equip. So if I do this again, now it is much faster. Well, maybe a little bit faster. We don't want it to be too slow. I want to change it to 3. So I think I'm gonna finish the video here. I was hoping to wrap things up in this video so I could start networking in the next video, but there's a few things that I need to do first. So probably in the next video we're also not gonna do the networking, and we're gonna do it in the video after that. I wanna make sure that I have a third person controller before I start the networking, and I want to have things be ready, and I want to just focus on the networking. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.